And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is episode number 41 of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 333rd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, August 24th, 2017. I am your host, Jared Morris. Remember, if you can't catch one of our shows live, you can always catch up with our podcast, which is available everywhere. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts, and you will find us. All right, let's begin how we begin every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And this week, if you missed it, Archie Miller addressed a room full of IU fans at an IU alumni event at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And as reported by Avi Zalian for the Indianapolis Star, Archie talked about addressing his 2017-18 IU team for the first time. He talked about the message of pride that he delivered, which will be an important rallying cry for the team this season. Archie also laid out 3 points of excellence that he believes will lead Indiana back to the path of hanging banner number 6 and maybe even banner number 7. Number 1, the development of players. Number 2, recruiting championship caliber people that accept the high standards in every facet of life. And number 3, building a system and style of excellence. Then he said this, and I quote, "If we stay with those 3 things and don't talk about anything else, I think we can get to be a Big Ten perennial championship team, a second and third weekend team in the NCAA tournament, and ultimately a team that's contending for a national championship on a yearly basis." It's not always easy to identify banner moments in the midst of the long offseason, but that, my friends, is what I call a banner moment. And that was this week's banner moment, brought to you by, as always, our friends at HoosierProud.com. And by the way, I actually spoke with Connor, the founder of Hoosier Proud, earlier this week, and he has some pretty exciting plans up his sleeve for some new IU-related T-shirt designs, as well as a potential T-shirt series in the works with an IU basketball legend that I really wish I could tell you about, but can't yet. But the details will be coming in good time, so stay tuned. All righty, well, let me now introduce my esteemed co-host for this evening. To my left is a man who will soon be beside himself with glee as he walks through grocery store magazine aisles and notices that Robert Johnson is a cover boy for several of the college basketball preview magazines. He is the president of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, one of the world's most respected bracketologists, and is old enough to remember the darkest day in Ohio State football history back in 1987, and hopeful that the Hoosiers can eclipse the Buckeyes again coming up next week. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line from the past week in Indiana basketball?
I mean, just that intro gave me a lot of different directions I could go. I am the person who, even though
you got the good one this week,
even though they say nobody's buying magazines, I will buy every damn one of the college basketball preview magazines that comes out. I've pre-ordered my copy of Blue Ribbon, so I'm ready to go on that. And the Ohio State stuff, living here in Buckeye country, that is a game that most people that I know do not recall, or at least acknowledge from an Ohio State standpoint in terms of the darkest day. So I hopefully will have another one here in about a week. But for me, one of the points that you brought up was about recruiting championship caliber people, and I think by any account, the biggest story this week was the commitment of Rob Phinisee. Important for a number of reasons. Another in-state kid, point guard, which was really a kind of glaring hole or question mark, at least in the recruiting class that may yet be filled by Darius Garland. His name is still out there, but I think Phinisee is exciting. I think he's a guy that you can see being a potential 4-year guy. And really, for me, the first point guard that'll be on the roster that Archie recruited, that he can kind of, use his background as a major college point guard and see what he can really develop out of him over the course of 4 years. Because I think by most accounts, he's a 4-year player. And so when you look back on what is hopefully a very successful, coaching tenure for Archie Miller here, it's not hard to think about. You'd be able to point back to getting a guy who's a real leader, coach on the floor type guy, and true point guard in Phinisee, who becomes a 4-year staple of the IU program. So I think that that is exciting. Obviously, time will tell if that all comes out to be true. But for me, that was easily the story of the week and the thing that I was most excited about, outside of the Robert Johnson covers, of course.
And to my right, we have a man who is celebrating his birthday this week, although he doesn't want to tell anyone how old he is. So those of you who are watching live, put your guesses into the chat box, and we'll see who gets it right. I'm guessing 24. He's also a columnist for The Big Lead. And he is willing to bet anyone a ham sandwich that Indiana will draw more fans for the September 16th game against FIU than the San Diego Chargers will draw all year in LA. Any takers? He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what Indiana basketball topic would you like to rant about this week?
We got to be specific because I've been ranting a lot on Twitter this week about other things in case you haven't been following, which you should, at Rumors and Rants, please. Thank you. Self-plug. I think it's the Phinisee news as well, and I like it because it's another Indiana kid. That's 2 in this recruiting class. And he's a guy who, we'll get into it a little bit, but he fits a lot of what Archie Miller likes to do. It's a very good fit for the system, a very good fit for this team. And as Andy pointed out, it's a long-term fit. This isn't a guy who's going to come in and be here for a year and bolt to the next level. And, you know, quite frankly, when you're building a program as Archie Miller is, to have a point guard you can build around long-term and a guy who may be able to come in and actually just be a freshman for a year and then, you know, sort of build up his minutes into his sophomore year and things like that. That's a huge win for him because it's a guy at a leadership position at the point guard. And we'll get into it. I have a scouting report on him, but I thought that was great news for Indiana. I think it was expected. I think we all predicted that would be the next commitment when we were talking about it a couple weeks ago. And, you know, came just at the right time. And now Indiana could focus all its energy on adding another player.
Alrighty, so here's what we're going to discuss this week. We will, of course, break down the Robert Phinisee commitment, what it means, and what kind of player Indiana is getting. Ryan got tape. There we go. We're going to briefly, very briefly, touch on the Grant Gelon non-story that is only a story because it's a slow part of the offseason. So we're going to hit on that very briefly. Plus, there's some news and notes from this week, including the probability of a 20-game Big Ten schedule, which is interesting. And, of course, we have your questions. Plus, we may get into a little bit what Indiana does from a scholarship strategy perspective. I did a quick hit podcast on that on Thursday morning, and so we may talk a little bit about that too. All of that and more on this jam-packed edition of Assembly Call Radio. Real quick, before we get to that stuff, remember that when you need tickets to a sporting event, to a concert, or any other event, check SeatGeek first to ensure that you get a great deal, and use the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, when you make your first purchase so that you get $20 back after that purchase. For example, tickets are still available for next week's Indiana-Ohio State game, and when I checked earlier today, they were as low as $64, which I know sounds like a lot for an IU football game, but that's the lowest that I've seen it actually for this game in particular. So it's a heck of a deal for a game of this magnitude, and we need to make sure there's as much red as possible there, and actually that the red that's there is Indiana Crimson, not Ohio State Scarlet. To find the best price on tickets to this game and the rest of the IU football schedule, visit the URL iufbtickets.shop, not .com.shop. That's iufbtickets.shop. That's actually our affiliate URL, meaning that when you use it to browse tickets at SeatGeek, we get a commission whenever a purchase is made. So in other words, you get a great deal on IU tickets and you help support the Assembly Call, a win-win. And hopefully it's a win-win-win and the Hoosiers knock off the Buckeyes on Thursday night. Again, the URL, iufbtickets.com. All righty, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips talking IU basketball. And guys, let's talk about the Rob Phinisee commitment. Obviously huge on a number of levels. Ryan, I know that you had a chance to watch him. So I don't know if we'll be able to get through the full scouting report this segment. This may need to spill over into the next segment. But let's begin by talking about what kind of player Rob Phinisee is. And I had a chance to kind of break this down with Alex Bozich on a podcast on The Brink earlier this week. So I'll give some thoughts later. But I want to hear your thoughts, obviously getting a chance to watch him extensively.
Well, he's, you know, for those who don't know, he's a 6-foot point guard, about 160 pounds out of McCutcheon High School in Lafayette, Indiana. Someone here went to high school in Lafayette.
We played McCutcheon. They were a big rival.
He's a pure point guard. I like him, you know, but he's a scorer too. I mean, it's a mix. I mean, he definitely has the ability to be a distributor. You know, I'm just touching on this right now. We can get into it more in depth in the next segment, but I think it's what I like about him is he's versatile. He can be that, you know, pass first guy, or he can score. I love his jumper. I think he has a real quiet shot. You know, you see a lot of these kids who start playing basketball when they're really young have shots where there's a lot of arm involved and a lot of, you know, maybe they over jump because when they start shooting threes, they're not strong enough to get the ball up there. And so they put a lot of, you know, overemphasis into it. He is super balanced. I love the way he shoots. His follow through is perfect. A lot of the release and rotation are perfect. I think
that's coming from the shot doctor, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
and his prognoses are usually pretty tough.
I think he's got a very good shot. I think he over rotates a little bit sometimes, but that's fixable, and that's just a young guy who, when he gets stronger, he won't. I think he's very underrated nationally. He's ranked 101 on the 24/7 composite. I think that he is much better than that. I think he's the 17th ranked point guard nationally on the 24/7 composite. I think he's much better than that. I'm not saying he's a 5-star, but I could see him. I mean, you could put him 40 spots higher, and I'd be fine with it nationally. So yeah, I think that he's a guy who, of course, needs to gain weight, needs to get stronger. That's a big aspect of what he's going to need to get better at, is just get in a weight room and put on some weight. Because when he's finishing, he doesn't really finish through contact. He kind of tries to go over guys or around them instead of, just plowing through the way you're supposed to when you're a point guard in the paint in the Big Ten. So I'd like to see that some. And I think he's a great passer. One thing I really loved is he puts the ball in guys' hands. He doesn't pass to the body. He passes to the hands. And so guys can catch it and go up with a shot really quickly instead of having to catch it, gather, and then shoot. He gets it to guys where they can use it. And I think that, and I think his vision is there, but I think he's probably going to need to be in the film room to improve that, just see the floor better. If you're in the film room, you learn a lot more about the game. Then you go out and put it into practice. I think that will improve with time. But it's the makings of a player with some pretty good vision right now.
And he's a natural point guard. Like, he is a pure point guard. He's a guy with a high assist turnover ratio. He's a guy that everybody that has seen him play, that has intimate knowledge of his game, talks about his leadership abilities, his abilities to just control things out there on the floor. So even if his numbers don't overwhelm you in a particular game, he may have still had a great game because he controlled the pace for his team and he got guys involved, and he was just that quiet leader out there. Andy, I'm curious from your perspective, does he remind you of anybody? Maybe think about point guards from IU's past, or just anybody nationally. Is there anybody? Because I know it's hard for those of us who don't get to watch these guys play every game. It helps to have a frame of reference for a comparison, even though they're inherently unfair. But is there anybody that comes to mind that might give folks a frame of reference for his game?
I can't really. I'm struggling to think of an IU comp. I don't know if you have one. But
the one that keeps coming to me is Michael Lewis, and it's obviously incomplete in a lot of ways. But I think just in terms of a guy who is a pure point guard, a pass first type guy, leadership type guy. He obviously doesn't have the fiery personality that Michael Lewis had, but that's the one that strikes me as being the most similar. Even though there's obviously a lot of differences, but
yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting one. What struck me in watching him is that he doesn't necessarily overwhelm you with athleticism, but he always seems to be really under control. And I think
that's
in some of those,
big part of his game. Yeah,
he just seemed nothing was rushed, nothing was really forced, and I think. Obviously he'll struggle to maintain that as a freshman and as he gets into, big time college basketball. But, those were the things that kind of stuck out to me, less, skill based type things. And I remember a couple years ago when they made a run to the state title game in Indiana, that he was consistently talked about as one of the guys that was really the leader of that team, even as an underclassman. At that standpoint. So I think, those kinds of leadership qualities, I think play really well. And I think that maybe is where the Lewis and the pass first nature of that comes into play. I'll have to think about that a little bit more and think if I can come up with another Big Ten one. But IU wise, at least recent history feels that way. Because I think when you think traditional point guards in a lot of cases for IU, you go back to, we'd probably harken back to like, Chris Reynolds or Jamal Meeks or somebody like that. And I think, to Ryan's point, Phinisee's offensive game is a lot more refined than you'd say about those guys.
Well, more recently at Yogi Ferrell, but they have drastically different games. And Yogi had more of a scorer's mentality than Robert does. So different types of players. All right, we're going to take a break. Coming up, we're going to talk about some of the drawbacks to Robert's game and also how he fits and what his chances are of starting from day one. That is coming up on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. Beautiful. All right, 1440 for that segment. Hello to everybody watching live.
Someone in the chat guessed I was 33. I love you.
How old are you? 46?
You don't know how
37, right? You're 37, right? I think I heard you because Kent made you say.
Yeah, I know you're on with Kent.
Otherwise, I'm not sure that I would have known. But
I heard it.
Everyone thinks I look younger. At least that's good, right?
So quick update, just so you guys know, our second segment will be a little bit shorter. So the show is broadcast live Friday nights on CBS 1430 in Indianapolis. And on Friday nights, they now have Roncalli football. So our Friday night show is 30 minutes or 26 minutes. So we have to do our first two segments in 26 minutes. The second two segments will be 24 minutes. So usually our second segment is a little bit longer, but you'll notice that we're going a little bit shorter with the second segment now.
Yeah, just keep us posted on the time, Jared.
I will. We have.
So we've got like 11 something, right? So that was 14.
Yeah. That was 14:40.
Yep. So 11:20.
We've got 11:20, and the outros take about 17 seconds. So basically at 11:03.
11 minutes. Okay.
11:03 we'll get out. Okay, so let's be efficient with this segment. I
can jump right into concerns with this game because they're
okay. So let's start with concerns for his game, and let's talk about how he fits. Kind of looking at next year's roster. Obviously, if Darius Garland comes, that changes everything. But essentially, he's going to be competing with Devontae Green or Al Durham to play point guard next year.
I don't think Darius Garland's coming.
Well, no one thinks he is, but he's taking an official visit. So, I mean, that's something. He's coming for
the guy loves Vanderbilt for some reason.
Well, it's because that's where he's from.
I mean, I know, but still.
Well,
I like San Diego. I'm from San Diego. I don't like San Diego State. They're all right.
Maybe you should.
I like the ladies at San Diego State.
Maybe you should. All right. And by the way, I apologize in advance. I'm battling a little bit of a cold, so I'm a little sniffly. Okay. Here we go. All right. Are we ready for segment number 2? Gentlemen?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay. Here we go. I'll keep you updated on the time in the chat.
Thanks.
Okay. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris talking IU basketball with my co-hosts on the Assembly Call IU postgame show, Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Ryan, let's jump right in here. You gave us a lot of the positives about Robert Phinisee's game in our last segment. What are some of the concerns about his game as he looks to transition to the next level?
Well, one thing about him that I will say that's positive, but this is going to lead to a negative. He's really quick, and he's got good speed, got a great crossover. I like some of that stuff. But one problem he has when he's going to the hoop is he kind of hops as he's going along instead of just making a smooth drive to the hoop. It's kind of like he hops along every.
But it'd be nice. Maybe that's because no one has a sign on the sidelines telling him not to hop.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you had a sign,
if only he wouldn't hop.
They should really
Yeah,
do that.
I wouldn't have done that if I'd known it wasn't okay.
Somebody should do signs. That. Really, you'd think a genius coach would come along and do that.
It's preposterous, totally preposterous.
But he kind of hops his way to the hoop, and that works in high school, and he can get away with it. But instead of being quick and smooth to the hoop, which is what you need at the next level, it's going to hold him back. So he needs to get a little quicker to the hoop, maybe more decisive in what he's going to do with the ball when he gets it, as opposed to just kind of stuttering along as he goes. And I think that, again, the need to add a lot of strength to help his finishing is going to be huge for him. I know I mentioned that before, but I need to double down on it because it feels like when he drives in, he's almost afraid to get hit or bumped off the line and off his line to the hoop, and he's gonna need to get stronger there. But other than that, I really like what I see, especially as a future for him in Archie's system. I think he's a willing defender. I think he's got enough length to be a good defender. As Andy said, he's not an off the charts athlete. He's not an above the rim player, really. I mean, he can get up, but not that far. I think that he may be able to unlock a little more athleticism in a college strength program, but he's not going to be a guy that's just going to wow you with athleticism. He's more just a smart, heady player who can score and who can sort of do everything on the floor. A very well-rounded guy. And that's another reason why I like the fit, because Archie Miller was a point guard. Now, obviously, Robert is bigger, taller, a better athlete than Archie, but Archie was a guy who didn't have great athleticism, didn't have great height, but he became a successful player because he worked hard and he could shoot and he had guile and he was a leader. And those are some of the things that I think Robert is going to need to do to become, an elite level college point guard as a junior or senior, which I think we all think
he has the potential to become. Andy, the question I want to ask you is, what can he do right away? Because look, as soon as Yogi Ferrell left campus, there was a gaping hole at point guard. We all know it. It showed up all year last year. This year it's probably going to be a lot of the same. I mean, Josh Newkirk, we expect to get the first shot at that. None of us think Robert Johnson is a natural point guard. And then you've got guys like Devontae Green. Well, he's not. That's just not his role. But, so you've got kind of the stop gaps that we're going to try again this season. And then next year, Robert will come in. And, you've got Devontae Green, who will be on the roster. Obviously, Curtis Jones isn't a point guard. Al Durham played point guard in high school. But, I don't know if anybody thinks that he's going to be ready as soon as next season to step up. So when you project Robert Phinisee forward, if we assume that Indiana doesn't get someone like Darius Garland coming in as well, which I think is what most people assume, even though he's taking an official visit, do you see Robert Phinisee stepping on campus and being the starter from day one?
I certainly think he has the opportunity to do so. Really at that point it becomes, between him, Devontae Green, and Al Durham. And, Green, I think, wow, from a size perspective, I think most people think that's his, maybe where he ends up. I don't know that that's his natural position either. And Durham, I think you could see with some of his length and ability to defend, I could see him, playing his way into Archie's good graces from that perspective. But I think the opportunity is right there for him to be able to come in and do that. I think the question becomes at that point, we think back to Yogi's freshman year, and he was able to really focus on just distributing because he was surrounded by so much other talent. And as you start to spin forward with the number of seniors on this year's roster, and obviously everybody's excited about the recruits, like what does the team look like around Phinisee if he's a freshman point guard, and does that help him get put immediately in a position to succeed? There's obviously a lot of things that could happen between now and then, so it's hard to speculate on that. So if the question is truly just whether he could come in and get the job right away, I think that's absolutely a possibility. I think if he, can assert himself on defense, that's going to go a long way, I think, toward, earning playing time, because he comes in with some of the natural point guard skills that Archie will look to refine as he's there. But I think that possibility is there. How successful he can be as a freshman in that scenario, I think, is a little bit more dependent upon the supporting cast, because when we think about, typical situations for a freshman point guard, that's a lot of the success factors are external to that person.
Been run.
Yeah, I think that you guys know I'm fully on the Devontae Green train. I think that he's going to be a junior that year, and I think he's.
But as a point guard, though, I mean, a lot of us are on the train as a good player, but as your lead guard, you're on that train.
I think so. I think he's going to be a junior, and I think he's going to have rounded into shape in that way. Maybe he won't be the perfect point guard and won't be exactly what you expect, but I think that at that point he'll be in a leadership role, and if he develops the way we think he's going to, I think he's. And that's not to say Robert Phinisee can't win a starting job. I think that my thought is that Devontae Green will have earned that role by then, and Phinisee can be the second unit point guard, a guy who can sometimes play on the floor with Devontae Green, or a guy like that, if everything keeps developing the way we think it is with this roster.
I will say it strikes me as ideal for him to have the chance to kind of learn maybe in a backup role and not have to be thrust into that starting role with all that pressure and expectation.
I would agree, and I think that we all love to have a 5-star guy who comes in as a star right away, or whatever. But also, when you look at guys like the guy we always point back to is Victor Oladipo. Had he come in and he had to contribute right away, does he develop the way he did? Probably not. I mean, had he had to contribute in a major way right off the bat? Probably not. What was good about him is he could come in for 10, 12-minute bursts of just furious activity, do whatever, play defense, be what he had to be, and then go to the bench and watch the game and learn. And
similar to your role on the show.
Of course, yeah. I mean, how can you argue that? And of course, an all-star, all
10, 12 minutes. That's about the length of the monologue sometimes.
Yeah, usually.
Unless a really big San Diego sports story drops, at which point,
yeah, I mean, the
all bets are off.
At that
so many
point,
bingo boxes are being checked off right now.
Hey, you started it, not me.
I know.
But I would say that I think that, getting to come in and learn and play, but play limited minutes, I think is a real benefit to a guy. Unless you're going to be a 5-star and jump to the NBA, you're looking at a career, not 1 year. So I like that for a freshman to get to be a freshman and sit on the bench during a game and watch what other guys do and learn from it, and then go out there, put it into use, see what was good, what was bad, come back out, learn some more. That can really make a guy better in the long term. And I think that is sort of what I would target for Robert if everything if the roster looks the same in 2 years as it looks right now.
So it was a big commitment. Now Indiana has 2 scholarships remaining for next year. We know that one of those scholarships is earmarked for Romeo Langford, and we'll hold on to it for as long as it takes, until he commits. What do you guys want to see Indiana do with the other one? Because you've got Jake Forrester coming in for an official visit. He's kind of a high 3-star guy, a 6'8", 6'9" forward with a good motor, but not, a slam dunk superstar, but a potential solid guy. But you look in the near future at the class of 2019, and Indiana's in good position with a lot of guys. They've just got to have some scholarships. Now, we don't know who might transfer. We don't know a lot of things. All we know is Juwan Morgan is the only guy who's going to be a senior next season. And so there doesn't project to be just a huge glut of scholarships. So, Andy, do you want to see Indiana take a guy like a Jake Forrester, or continue to target, some guys who are closer to blue chip status like a Darius Garland or a Luguentz Dort? Or do you want to see Indiana be really patient to the point of possibly hanging on to that scholarship so that they've got it in their pocket for the 2019 class?
Yeah, it's definitely tricky with the amount of seniors on this year's roster, and at some point you got to try to rebalance that out a little bit. I think if they wanted to go after anybody else that would be in the class, I think Dort feels kind of like that guy. I mean, there's really not. He would fill a role that, if Curtis Jones has the season that you think he's going to have this year, then maybe that role is filled at that point. But otherwise, really kind of
Dort. Dort is awesome.
Shooting guard who can really go out and score, I think would be interesting, and something where there's not a lot of redundancy on the roster. Otherwise, do you hang on to it to take a grad transfer so that you can still get something out of the scholarship, but push that forward? I think somebody had that question, which I think is an interesting way to think about it. But yeah, I just don't know that you can continue to, at some point you've got to spread out these, 5, 6, open scholarships. And so, Race Thompson coming in a little bit earlier is one way to do that, although he's redshirting, so it doesn't really, have exactly that effect. So I would be inclined to say if they're going to take somebody else that would come in as a freshman, I think Dort would seem to be the most logical choice. If not, I think you might look at, a grad transfer, or maybe even, I guess, another transfer doesn't help you all that much because they're still sitting out and using the scholarship. So those are at least a couple thoughts that I had. But, Archie to me doesn't seem like a guy who's going to play everybody anyway, and typically has not, and has talked openly about wanting to save some of the scholarships. So feels like it wouldn't be shocking if he banked one. The question is, if you hold on to that one that you're going to bank and the one for Romeo, and then Romeo goes someplace else, do you have to try to do something to get the to use up the other one?
Ryan, real quick, what would you do? 20 seconds. You're muted.
Finally.
Enjoy the silence, everybody.
Man, this is great. We should do more of the show like this.
I was open on the one. No, I would say you bank it. I'd say that you hold one scholarship for Langford or Dort. You're not going to get both, and you bank the other one. I think you have to spread this out.
Yep. Alrighty. Coming up on the assembly call, we are going to get into some interesting news and notes that occurred this week, break all those down for you, and hit anything lingering on this issue as well. It's coming up. Stick with us. Perfect.
One of you two muted me on.
I did not mute you.
One of you accidentally muted me on Hangouts because I was unmuted on Skype.
Look. If I knew I could do that, I would have done it a lot more times.
I was unmuted on Skype, so
I didn't do it.
It's going to go on through the radio show. But
no, I couldn't hear it, and I'm listening through the radio show.
Yeah, really? Because I was unmuted there.
I didn't come through because I didn't see the little line coming up. Okay. I guess I should probably listen to those first 2 segments, and make sure they recorded properly.
Yeah, that'd be nice because I really don't have a whole lot of time to spend recording this. So,
no, we're good. We're good. Okay.
Recording, I should say.
Okay, so good. So that's 26 minutes. So now we've got 24 minutes for these next 2 segments. Okay, so for segment 3, I've said my piece on Gelon. Ryan, you said yours on Kent Sterling. So, Andy, we'll get your thoughts on it real quick just to address it, and then move on. You can basically.
What did you say?
Just that,
Archie share some thoughts on how terrible the Eagles defense looks in this preseason game as well. So that will be entertaining for everyone.
Good. That's good job knowing the audience there.
Yeah.
You really know how to read a room, Bottoms.
Yeah.
Hey, look, this is important to some people, so back off.
Yeah, I mean, the way I feel about the Gelon story is that Archie handled it how you would want someone to handle it, and I think Grant's going to regret it going public because I think
his parents are the ones who pushed it public.
Well, I agree, and I just think like Indiana fans like
I
really
feel bad for
support.
Grant, honestly.
I do too. Indiana fans really support people, who transfer and go someplace else. And I think I don't think anybody's going to really hold this against him, but it's kind of a negative way to go out, and it seemed just unnecessary. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel bad for Grant.
Reading any story like that makes me uncomfortable when I first read it, just because I don't like stories like that. But then you actually get in the details, and it's like, all right, what else do you want Archie to do?
I don't think I don't think anybody handled it the wrong way, except for it feels like Grant's parents did.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's go. I got work. I'm gonna go fast.
Ryan's got things to do.
I do.
Okay, let's do this.
What other topics are we going to talk about here? Twitter question.
I'll introduce the new walk-on real quick. And then I think the two that we can actually dig into a little bit are the move to the 20-game schedule, which is pretty interesting. And then they've got that new idea for the 3-on-3 tournament, the Final Four. So we can talk about that and what it is, and then talk about what a possible Big Ten team could be like this year. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not heard about that at all.
Well, we're going to break some news to you here live on the Assembly Call.
Do it.
It's going to be awesome.
I was saying that one, if we wanted to push to the last segment or something, we could, depending on how long we got the other stuff. But
okay. They should do 3-on-3 with the different post-game show hosts of other teams. We'll take on all comers. All comers.
The NCAA is going to be okay with that?
It has nothing to do with the NCAA because the guys have exhausted their eligibility. It's the same people who do the dunk contest and 3-point contest. So it has, $100,000 to the winner.
No, for the dunk contest.
4 ways. I don't know.
See, I didn't think you did.
I don't know if you get money, but it's the same people. So
cool. No, I like the idea.
Yeah. All right, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com/join to activate your free membership, and you will get our weekly 6-banner Sunday news roundups delivered right to your inbox every Sunday morning so that you can stay up to date with your Hoosiers during the off season and even once the season begins. The URL is assemblycall.com/join. I am Jared Morris talking IU basketball with my co-hosts on the Assembly Call, Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And guys, there were some interesting headlines this week in addition to Rob Phinisee's commitment. And so let's run through some of those and give you guys a chance to give your thoughts on some of these headlines. Let's start with the Grant Gelon story. And again, we don't want to talk too much about this. Ryan, you had a chance to talk with Kent Sterling about this on the radio earlier this week. I had a chance to talk about it on Podcast on the Brink. And so, we've kind of made our thoughts known about this. I don't feel like we need to recap this too much because everybody, I think, probably knows the basics of the story by now. But, essentially Grant feels wronged a little bit by how he was treated in the transition to Archie Miller and feels a little bit run off. Andy, you haven't had a chance to speak about this. Do you have a different take on this? What are your thoughts on the Grant Gelon story?
I mean, I did speak about it to my wife. You guys big timing me on your, podcast and radio show, but I did speak about it with someone to get my feelings out so that I wouldn't hold them until now. No, I think, to me, I go back to just the signing of him originally. Even at the time, it kind of reeked to me of a half-hearted Crean response to the "you're not getting Indiana kids anymore," and it's like, oh look, I got one. But when you really go back at recruiting rankings and things like that, yeah, you could kind of see how his skill set as a primary shooter might fit into some of the things that Crean wanted to do. But otherwise, it never really made a ton of sense, and it never really felt like by any measure, the caliber of athlete that he was didn't really fit in. And it wasn't a case of a OG Anunoby or a Victor Oladipo where it's not a diamond in the rough scenario who was really athletic and raw. That was never the scenario here. So to me, I think it's unfortunate, but I think that, I think Archie handled it about as well as he could. I think, from day one, he's been a pretty straight shooter about just about everything and what his expectations are. And if the alternative is, I'm not going to talk to you about it, and I'm just not going to play you and sit you here on the bench so that you're, the time that you spend here is spent never getting playing time. I don't really see how that's better. And that to me really felt like the alternative.
One other angle on this, Ryan, you were probably higher on Grant Gelon than anybody, just as a player. So how, like, when you look at this in terms of the impact long-term basketball-wise, like, do you think this is a mistake at all or a loss for Indiana, or do you think it's in the best interest?
You have to remember the systems are different. I liked him for Crean's system where you need a guy who can spread the floor and shoot. And I thought Gelon was a really good shooter who could occasionally do other things.
Because you could squint and see Nick Zeisloft in his development. Basically.
There and maybe a little Colin Hartman too with the diving after loose balls and doing the things that help a team win. But he's not as good as either of those guys. But with those guys moving on, I could see Gelon. I could have seen him as a junior, maybe being a guy who could fill some of that role off the bench. But again, there was no doubt that he. That he wasn't of the caliber of athlete and the caliber of player that usually comes to Indiana. If he is a deep bench guy who can come in and hit some threes for you and spread the floor in Crean's system that was so heavily reliant on shooting threes, I can definitely see what they were looking at there as an eighth man who can shoot and spread the floor. He was never going to be a starter. I don't think anybody thought that unless it was an emergency. But I thought, as you said, Andy, I thought that Archie pretty much handled it as he was supposed to. He told the kid, hey, this isn't going to work out here. We would like, to have you, if you want to stay on scholarship and finish up at school, that is your right to do that, but you're not going to play basketball here. And wasting practice time on a guy is never going to play and does not fit your system is not being a smart basketball coach. So I think that guys who take over a new program, there's always guys who don't fit their system, who don't fit what they're going to do. And Archie Miller had every right to do what he did, I think. And I think he was honest with Gelon as a player.
Agreed, and Grant could have stayed on as a scholarship student at Indiana too because of the student-athlete Bill of Rights. So,
and along those same lines, Ryan, there's something Jared and I have been wanting to talk to you about as the regime change. No, I'm just kidding.
I will bury you with my spinoff, boys. Bury you. The assembly wall will destroy you.
Nice work. Good call there, Andy. Okay, second story, there is a new walk-on for the Indiana Hoosiers, as our friends at Inside the Hall reported. Ethan Lascaux, a 6'2", 171-pound guard from Hollywood, Florida, who averaged 25.6 points per game as a senior at Katz Yeshiva High School. And according to University Press, he also had a scholarship offer from Florida Atlantic. So, had another scholarship offer, obviously a scorer. I watched a little bit of the film on him that was posted on Inside the Hall. Kid's got a little bit of Jordan Hulls in him. Obviously not that good, but he can shoot, can penetrate a little bit. He strikes me as the kind of guy that's good to have around in practice because you're going to have to keep an eye on him because he's going to make you look foolish and make shots if you don't guard him. So, between he and Blackman, who's also a walk-on this year, it sounds like Archie is stacking up some shooters there, so his team will be well-versed in defending those guys. Let's move on now to the third story from this week, which this is a fun one. The Big Ten is looking to move to a 20-game schedule. Not certain whether it will happen next year, but it's possible that it happens next year. But everybody thinks, and this was first reported by John Rothstein of FanRag Sports, and he said the Big Ten is preparing its programs to go to a 20-game conference schedule during the 2018-19 season. So it could happen. The ACC goes to the 20-game schedule in the 2019-20 season, so everybody thinks it will for sure happen then. I think, instant reaction, hey, 2 more Big Ten games, sounds great. Get us a little bit closer to a true round robin. I feel like everybody will like that. The downside, of course, is now you remove a couple of non-conference games. And, if you're going to pull the Louisville and the Notre Dame game out of there, that makes your non-conference schedule a little bit less fun. I tend to think with the way Archie wants to schedule that we'll be getting rid of either a much lower tier game or, one of those mid-tier games, keeping the high-profile games.
Or one of each.
Yeah, possibly something like that. But I feel like it wouldn't impact getting the Kentucky series going again or playing the Arizona series. So those high-profile games would still be prioritized by this staff, it sounds like. Andy, your initial thoughts to the potential 20-game schedule?
Well, I was waiting for the part where it was like, in all of these extra games we played in New York as an emerging market for the Big Ten, but that part was not in the release.
A week before the season's supposed
Give them
to
time.
start. Yeah.
Give them time.
Yeah. After the Big Ten tournament is played there in the middle of February. No. So I think I don't really have any issue with it. Certainly we talk about how unbalanced scheduling always seems to impact the conference race. And I think this is a step toward toward fixing that. I think the thing that I start to wonder is, does it mean, where do you fit those games in? Is it, do they kind of stick with this early December time frame? And even though the reasons to have the 2 early games this year are different, because of the Big Ten tournament being when and where it is, do you kind of stick with that model where it follows up the Big Ten ACC? Do you stick them more at the, or do you just add on to the beginning of the conference season, which puts them in late December when students aren't there? I mean, to me, that's the only part that I have some concern about is, and we talk about this even with the, the early conference games in January. Part of the allure of conference basketball to me is the environment, and whatever you can do to preserve that environment to be there for as many of the games as you possibly can, I'm all for that. So to me, the biggest question, I don't really have questions or concerns about the fact that they are doing it. It's just a matter of logistically, how does it work? Where do they fit the games in, and things like that. I think schools can adjust the non-conference schedule well enough, as we've seen everybody kind of have to do this year, and still be able to fit in games. But it's more of the, how can you preserve that excitement level that you get of having these on campus with students there.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. Real quick, Ryan, I'm Jared Morris. Here talking IU basketball with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We were talking about the story that broke this week by John Rothstein that the Big Ten is looking to go to a 20-game schedule. Ryan, what are your thoughts on it? Anything to rant about here?
I sincerely dislike December conference games. I think the conference season, the allure of it is the students are on campus. Those games all feel like, in a lot of cases, they feel like rivalry games. There's a great atmosphere wherever you're playing. I hate when they play games in conference in December. It's awful. The arenas are dead for sometimes great matchups. I just think that's stupid. Now, I'm cool with the 20-game schedule, but they have to figure out a way to do it so it doesn't impact that environment. And what makes Big Ten games great is that environment, I think. And yeah, sure, there's a lot of talent. Watching those guys go head to head is great, but the atmosphere is what makes it special, especially at a place like Indiana. So if opponents, if they find out they're playing Assembly Hall in December, are thrilled that they get that environment and not the one with the students there where it's crazy.
Half the Big Ten got to experience that last year.
Seems like that.
Yeah. Okay, so that was our third story. Our fourth story, this is a fun one. So I don't know if you guys heard, but there is this proposal on the table for a 3-on-3 tournament at the Final Four that could start as soon as this year. So Matt Norlander from CBS Sports, who co-hosts the excellent Eye on College Basketball podcast with Gary Parrish, friend of the show, as he reported,
name drop everybody.
It will be one team per conference, $100,000 to the winners, and only seniors who have exhausted eligibility but are not also playing in the Final Four can make it. So obviously Robert Johnson won't be eligible when Archie Miller takes the Hoosiers to the Final Four in a big surprise in his first season. Now, Ryan, when we talked about this in the break, that was your first question, is the NCAA okay with this? To my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the NCAA has anything to do with this because the players have exhausted their eligibility. So it's not like they can go to, Vince Edwards and say, hey, you can't play in this because you're going to be ineligible next year. He's exhausted his eligibility already. So it's beyond that, but just kind of a fun way to have another event, give the, what I really like about it is it gives these guys, these seniors who have been around, another chance to kind of capitalize at, kind of the peak of their notoriety and their earning potential as college basketball players, because most of these guys probably aren't going to go on to big, long NBA careers. And so I really like it from that perspective, and I just think it'll be fun. What do you think about this?
I think it is a fun idea. I think it's also a way for some of these seniors to showcase themselves on a stage before, they might, guys who might be overlooked by the NBA. If you get some good broadcast, a good broadcast situation and these guys get to play and show off a little bit, I think that it would be great. My question is, would the NCAA allow it? Obviously, I know that they will have exhausted their eligibility, but the season will still be going on. The college basketball season will technically still be going on, and they may not want checks being cut to scholarship athletes while, the basketball season is still technically going on. I'm not sure what the exact rules on that are. So that was my first concern. But if the NCAA is fine with it, then that would be just is not going to make a stink about it. Really, I'm fine with it. But if the NCAA is not going to make a stink about it, I think that would be great for those players and the chance to show off, chance to have some fun. It would certainly be something I would watch. I think it'd be great.
Our friend Jen here live in our YouTube chat, who asked a great question that we're going to get to in the next segment. She just asked this question. Did they say only one team per conference? Yes. Wonder how they'd choose the team. I don't know.
Conference officials are going to choose the team, it seems like.
Conference officials.
The invites will come from the people doing the tournament. They will invite guys, and guys will accept or decline, obviously, but they will do it in concert with conference officials.
So let me ask you guys this. If we project forward for the Big Ten this year, you talk about some of the top seniors, and if you just go down that inside the hall list of the top 25 players, you run across Nate Mason, Vince Edwards, Isaac Haas, Robert Johnson, Bryant McIntosh, Scotty Lindsey, Dakota Mathias. Andy, who are your four if you're picking the four? Three guys to play, obviously, and one guy coming off the bench. Who are you picking?
Well, obviously,
for your Big Ten team.
If the situation presents itself where IU is not in fact in the Final Four, I would certainly pick Robert Johnson. I guess you'd go with Haas because you need a big guy. Most of the guys you mentioned are not very big.
You got to go Haas, I think.
I think Edwards from a versatility standpoint, and then defense, I guess too. Nate Mason because he's been there the longest. I think he's this is like his third senior year, as I recall. I've picked up magazines to go back to that the last 3 years and thought, hey, I didn't know this guy was back. So I think he maybe just on longevity might be there. Although Scotty Lindsey, I think or Mathias are good shooters, but I can't pick that many Purdue guys, so that's unacceptable.
And somewhere Bryant McIntosh is just shaking his head as people overlook him again.
Yeah, I think McIntosh.
I would pick Nate Mason too, though.
I think McIntosh would be my first guy off the bench. How many? Or have they said how many people it would be? 4 or 5?
4 guys. 4 guys.
Okay.
3 play.
Yeah, I think you got to go with Rojo for defense. I think Isaac Haas certainly for his size. And I think that if you've got Rojo as the defender and the shooter, then you could definitely put McIntosh in there, and then maybe Nate Mason or Vince Edwards as your other guy. So those would be my picks.
Yeah, I would go Mason, Vince Edwards, Robert Johnson, and Isaac Haas. So I'm not necessarily saying those are the best players, but that seems like the best roster construction for actually winning the tournament. So let us know who you think. Send us a tweet at Assembly Call. We'd love to know who you think would be good for that. Okay, let's get to our final segment here coming up. We got several good questions on Twitter, and we want to answer them. And we will do that coming up in our final segment on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. Beautiful. That was 15-17. Good job, gentlemen. Okay, so we're at 41-18 total. So that gives us 8:42, which means 8:06. 8:06, we got to stop the break. Okay, cool. So let's see here. Let's look at these questions.
Yeah, there's not a ton.
There's not a ton
that will be lengthy because I think we've hit on the first couple a little bit.
Yeah, we have hit on those a little bit. Okay, if you guys have questions in the live YouTube, let us know. There you go. What coach would you compare Archie Miller to based on what you've seen so far? And you can't say Sean, I assume.
I think my least favorite thing to do is comparisons. Players, coaches. I don't know. I think that might be my least favorite thing to do.
I mean,
everyone asks about that with recruits, and it's really hard for me to come up with good ones. It really
I know,
is.
but it's useful. Like, I don't like it either, but it can be useful if you haven't seen a player. As long as you don't take it as like this guy is exactly like them, and you just take it as he's a close, approximation.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who Archie reminds me of. I would say, okay, I've got one.
Okay,
it's a Frankenstein. It's a Frankenstein, but
oh boy,
I thought maybe you were going to say a young coach from West Point back in the early 70s. Silence. Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just gonna let that go.
Okay, so we'll get to that one. What post player should we prioritize for 2019? That's a good question, too.
I don't even know. I haven't even looked at the tune.
James Weissman's the #1 player in the country, and he's got us in his, he's kind of assumed that Indiana's up there in the mix with him. Okay, so we got a lot of questions now. That's good.
All right. Well, if you get the 2019 big man one, you can take it because
you can take that. I haven't even looked at 2019 yet.
Okay. All right, here we go. What I said we have 8:06. Okay, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up another week talking IU basketball. Guys, we got a bunch of questions. Let's roll through some of these. And let's start right off the top with maybe the best question that we've ever gotten. And this is from Jen, longtime loyal listener to the show. She asks, when is Calbert Cheaney coming on the show? I think I speak for certainly Andy when I say that Calbert Cheaney is absolutely at the top of our Assembly Call bucket list. Anytime he wants to make himself available for an interview, we will be here to do it. So the answer is as soon as possible. So if anybody has contact information and wants to put in a good word for us, then please do, because we would love to make that happen.
Who is your Assembly Call bucket? Who would be like your top three? I'd say Calbert, certainly. I'd say Mark Cuban would be there.
He's not on. Mark Cuban wouldn't be on my bucket list.
You don't think so for our show?
I mean, I think it'd be great. Are you talking about my personal bucket list? I mean, it's got to be
on this show. I think Cuban would be awesome.
Calbert, Jay Edwards, and probably Alan Henderson would be my bucket list personally.
Okay, mine is
Those
Calbert.
are the guys I grew up with, so I've always got.
Well, mine's not in order. It's just three guys. It's Calbert is on there. Mark Cuban's number 2 on there, and Victor Oladipo would be number 3. I think Victor would be so good on the show.
I might have interviewed Victor on Podcast on the Brink.
I know you did, but this isn't Podcast on the Brink, Jared. What about you, Andy?
I mean, definitely. I mean, Cheaney might be like all three for me. I don't really, no, I think Cheaney for sure. I mean, Greg Graham, obviously, I feel like would be a choice. We can see who he compares himself to, as opposed to who Jared compares him to. So that would be a useful bit.
You know what's funny about that? I actually interviewed him way back when we had the Midwest Sports Fans podcast, and I just reached out to him and I said like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but we did this interview back then. I'd love to have you on our show because obviously it's a perfect fit since we mentioned him at least once a show. So I would love to do that again as well.
We almost missed this week until just now. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, good. Thank goodness. I don't know. I mean, Isaiah Thomas, I think, would be an interesting one. Maybe, certainly from an IU perspective, not really, as Jared kind of picked guys that we, kind of grew up watching. That would be it. I worry that if Cheaney did come on, that Jared and I would just kind of sit there dumbfounded, and it would turn into the old Saturday Night Live skits when like Chris Farley would be like with Paul McCartney, like, "Hey, do you remember that time that it would turn into?"
Remember that one time when you only need 1 point against Northwestern, and there was that sign that said Cheaney needs 1, and you made the shot. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yep. It would be a lot. It would be like 30 minutes of that. So, as long as he could put up with that, I think he's willing to come on. I just wanted to know what he's in for if he actually, if he does come.
Someone says AJ Moye in there. He would definitely be in my top 5 or 10.
That's a good one.
And I might have a lead on that one. So that one could happen.
You know who would be good
We're going to keep working on that.
You know who would be good too? And this will be controversial with some people, but I think he'd be really good would be Mike Davis. Would be a very good interview.
Mike Davis would be great.
That would be a great interview. Not necessarily, from a star perspective as with Cheaney or someone like that, but it would be a really interesting interview, I think, and a really good interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who would be great to interview the next week after Mike Davis would be Marco Killingsworth. And if you haven't heard any of the interviews that Marco has given since then, he provides some interesting insight on the Mike Davis era. Queer and Schultz have a podcast that they did with Marco Killingsworth that you should go check out because it's pretty good. Okay, let us know.
Don Fisher or Chuck Crabb could also be interesting if you start getting outside of like the player coach realm. I know you've talked to Fisher, so I'll just give it. I'll beat you to the drop on that one. Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard, but I already did that.
No,
that's what you probably think.
Chuck Crabb.
I hung out with Fish in Maui. I hung out with Don Fisher in Maui. That was fun.
You should have that on a T-shirt. That should be like a new Hoosier Proud T-shirt. I hung out with Fish in Maui. I would just want to get Chuck Crabb on here so that we could record him like doing intros or transitions and then just play those instead of me doing it. Because
I'd record him just saying funny things like, like Jared just dropped another name. Like just have drops that we could use for everything. It'd be great.
Yes. Okay. So that was an awesome question. This question from Jordan. Ryan, when and where did you discover Rob Phinisee?
On Inside the Hall. I discovered him. I was the first, and discovered him through highlights on Inside the Hall. Really the first to get there, and I've basically been his biggest cheerleader since I discovered him on a post written by Alex Bozich. So
by the way, Jen says yes, but you didn't have enough time with Victor on Podcast on the Brink, and that's true. We only had like 10, 11 minutes, but it was still awesome. Okay, we got a couple of questions, a couple of recruiting questions here that were good. Okay, Alex asks, what post player should we prioritize for 2019? So that's an interesting question because you've got, now you probably wouldn't consider Keon Brooks to be a post player, but he's a big guy. And you've got Trace Jackson Davis, who's certainly more of a post player, both Indiana guys, both top 40. It certainly seems like Indiana has a good chance at both of them. You certainly want to prioritize them, but you look at the very top of the 2019 list and you see the number one name, according to some services, is James Weissman, and he's a guy that has talked very highly of Indiana. So anytime you can get a chance to go after the number one guy, you certainly want to do that, but you obviously want to balance that with being able to get the guys that are in your own backyard. So, but let me ask you guys, I mean, if there's a real scholarship crunch there, how would you go about prioritizing in that case?
Obviously, man.
But which one would you prioritize? And some of it's going to depend on how good you feel in that individual recruitment. But would you say, if you have a chance at number one, James Weissman, would you still take the commitments from the Indiana kids, even though they're, quote unquote, lower rated?
Probably. I think that you can never go wrong with the Indiana guys who will be around for more than 1 year.
And they're still 5-star, high 4-star guys. If you get them, you take them, and you
be happy with it, yes. and don't, long for the 5-star guy who's only going to be on campus for 6 months. I think that in some cases with what Archie wants to do, building a system as opposed to just running five good players out there. I think that's in some ways having those better guys, unless it's going to be a Michael Porter Jr. or a Marvin Bagley, who is an all-world guy who's going to immediately change your program. I think that you go with the more solid guys you can get, or you feel like you can get, and who can impact the program for a longer amount of time. Look, if you're going to get the guy who's going to be the number one pick in the draft, you do it, of course. But sometimes those 5-star guys are just there biding their time till the draft. And I think that building something with guys for multiple years is the better solution if you're looking to win a college national championship. And you've kind of seen that over the last 4 years.
Okay, real quick. People asked who Archie reminds you of as a coach. Ryan, I know you have one. Andy, I want to give you a chance too. 15 seconds each. Go, Ryan.
He reminds me of a combination of Sean Miller and Tony Bennett. His brother and Tony Bennett are the two guys he reminds me of.
Are you allowed to say his brother? That seems like...
Hey, you asked the question.
I did. Okay. Andy, who would you
I'm going to say his dad then, and we'll just kind of leave it at that. He reminds me a lot of him.
They are related.
So I think that's the way that I'd go.
That's really the perfect note to end on.
Really is.
That's awesome. Well done, gentlemen. All righty. That will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live anytime and be part of our live chat, which was rolling for this episode, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live simulcast of our Assembly Call radio recording, or go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall, where you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to activate your free Assembly Call membership. Thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. Beautiful. 8:42 on the dot. Nice work, gentlemen. All right. That was by far the most active live chat that we've had for one of these.
I was checking in on it occasionally.
Yeah.
Audio settings. Hold on.
Good stuff in there. I like that.
All right, I'm getting off of Skype.
Okay. By the way, those of you who are here for YouTube, I don't know if you saw the email. We started a little Slack community for the Assembly Call. I figured we'd get like 10, 15 people. We've got over 100 people in there now as basically beta testers, but the community is starting to grow, which is cool. If you didn't get that email but you want in, send me an email to jared@assemblycall.com, and then I can send you an invite because it's pretty cool in there. I'm excited about where that can go.
All right. I am going to get back to work. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Go get some cereal, Ryan.
Oh, man, I need it bad. Later.
Hey, wait. We got to let people know next week. Next week, we're not doing the live show on Thursday night because of the game. So we're going to be recording on Friday. We'll have to see when and where. We'll have to see if we even broadcast that live, depending on where we are, what the recording situation is. But only next week, just because the game is Thursday night. We're not going to do the show live Thursday night. So that way we can reference it Friday for the show. And so we can actually watch the game. So just a quick note. All right.
There you go.
Talk to y'all later. Thanks for being here.
All right.